So today is all about the new registration training portfolio, why we've done what we've done, what the new portfolio is going to look like, and then how you're going to use it as a program lead or a placement tutor or somebody who runs an apprenticeship program. So we know we're very close to the launch date of the 1st of September when the new standards come in, but this is hopefully about making it a smooth transition for you into starting to use the version 5 portfolio. And we'll tell you what information we'll need at our end, and you can tell us how you'd like to coordinate and organise that from your university point of view. So if we get started then, version 5 will be the new registration training portfolio that comes in from the 1st of September 2023. And the reason that we've got the new training portfolio, I'm sure you know, is because the HCPC have updated their standards of proficiency. So we've had to update the portfolio because that's what it maps to. So the reason that we wanted to do this training event today is to allow you to ask us lots of questions, but also to just put in some context of the portfolio and what changes have been made. So as you will all know, anybody who's doing an IBMS accredited biomedical science degree can look at doing a clinical laboratory placement during the degree or after the degree in order to get the certificate of competence. And the reason that we have both of those bits, two pieces of the jigsaw, is that candidates need to have both IBMS accredited program or do top-ups to get the equivalents, and the IBMS registration training portfolio to meet the HCPC sets and SOPs. So the sets are the degree and the SOPs are the registration training portfolio. So I'm sure you're all very much aware of that, but that's the reason that we need to update you with the standards of proficiency and the portfolio today. So we can do the registration training portfolio via two different routes, depending on how you've set up your degree programme. Some degree programmes are a straightforward 3-year BSc without a placement year. It doesn't really affect those people. The most common routes are a sandwich placement. That would be after the end of the second year of study. Students would choose as an option to go on to a placement year, and that would be a sandwich route. Some programmes have an applied route, and that would be where all of the students on that route would do the registration training portfolio as part of a clinical placement. So it's what we call an integrated degree. So if you have an applied biomedical science programme, it could be students transfer onto that, but then all students on that route will do the placement and portfolio. It may be that you recruit directly to that programme and your admissions process takes care of all the DBS checks and all of those kind of things and interviews to get them onto the programme. It may be that you've got a level 6 degree apprenticeship that's aligned to the apprenticeship standard, and effectively it's an integrated programme because your apprentices will do the portfolio as one of their modules and they will all do it as part of their degree. So they're the ways in which students or apprentices on any of the programmes that we accredit might come across the registration training portfolio. So what we have at the moment, the current registration training portfolio is called version 4.3, and that's been in effect for quite a long time because the last time the HCPC updated the standards of proficiency was 2014, so it's quite a long time ago. So the registration training portfolio was mapped to the standards of proficiency from 2014. And at the moment, there are 105 different standards of proficiency for biomedical scientists that we have mapped to the portfolio, and we ask for 30 pieces of evidence to demonstrate that the candidate has met the threshold for competency and that they are eligible to register with the HCPC as a biomedical scientist. As you all know, I'm sure, the portfolio is organised into 2 sections. Each of those sections has 5 modules within them, and we've organised the portfolio so that 3 pieces of evidence are required for each of the modules. What we do currently is provide PDF documentation of the portfolio and the guidance, and we give that to our integrated degree programmes to distribute to their placement laboratories and to the students who are on placements for, or apprentices that are on an integrated route. And if it's a sandwich placement, we ask that you organise to contact the education team. They will send out that documentation, and then the candidate can start work on the portfolio. So we'll discuss with you as we go through how this is going to change now that we have this updated digital version. And then at the end of the placement, at the end of the portfolio evidence gathering and completing the portfolio, then that evidence will be shared electronically with the verifier for assessment. And at the moment, that's normally shared either by using a Google spreadsheet or Google Drive or by emails and attachments. So we're looking at updating, streamlining, and just bringing that process into the 21st century. So for the new standards, they were actually released last year in 2022. That gave a good year's run in to September 23 for everyone to be aware that they were new, what the changes were, and to be ready for the being able to evidence against the new standards of proficiency. The registration training portfolio has therefore been rewritten so that it maps to the new standards of proficiency, and this new version is called version 5. In the updated Standards of Proficiency, the HCPC have added in new standards for biomedical scientists. So we now have 129 Standards of Proficiency rather than the 105 previously. So there are more standards that you need to evidence against. And what we've done in the slides is we've added some links at the bottom where you can go and find the changes to the standards, the support offered by the HCPC about the new Standards of Proficiency, and also the full wording if they're useful to you. We've got those documents as PDFs as well, so we can share those with this group if that's helpful. But the HCPC is providing lots of information and updates on the standards as well. So what's important to know about the new standards? Hopefully you've seen them and you're getting familiar with them and you know what to expect as we move into September 2023. What you'll notice about the wording for the new Standards of Proficiency is it is much more a demonstration of I am actively implementing these things in what I do, rather than a passive understanding. I know about it, I've heard about it, I've read it somewhere. It's for the candidates to demonstrate how they do that in their practice. So it's a much more active demonstration of the competencies. The new standards also have more of a focus on promoting public health and preventing ill health. So that was in there before, but it's slightly bigger and beefed up in this version of the portfolio. There's more on equality, diversity and inclusion, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. So previously there weren't many standards of proficiency that covered EDI. There are many more now. So that's one of the things that's changed in the new portfolio. The focus on the service users has always been there, but now there's again a bigger and more enhanced piece around the service user and focusing on the service user as a patient, not necessarily a service user as someone from a different lab or a clinical scientist or a nurse or someone like that. So the importance of informed consent and effective communication come into those interactions that people might have with service users with a patient focus. Other things that have been updated in the new Standards of Proficiency include importance of maintaining fitness to practice, and that includes looking after the candidate's own mental health and being aware of how to seek advice and help if they need it. So that's part of the wellbeing information which has come into the new standards. And the other thing that they need to be able to do is to evidence how they keep up to date with digital skills and new technologies, which you would expect as things move forward in laboratories and as developments are made as an active practitioner. And then the final thing is to understand the role of leadership and the importance of leadership at all levels of practice. So that's not for somebody who might be a trainee or an apprentice to show that they are leading necessarily, but to understand what leadership looks like in different roles in the laboratory that they're familiar with and how that leadership is carried out. Affects other people in the laboratory, that kind of thing. So it's not about them showing they're leading something, it's about them showing they understand what leadership is and why it's important. And again, a link for the full wording of the standards is shown at the bottom of this slide. So on to the new portfolio then, version 5. What we're going to do is, I've spoken to the HCPC about the transition and we are allowed to issue the current version 4.3 portfolio up to and including the 31st of August this year. The new standards come into effect from the 1st of September 2023. So any applications that we received for a registration training portfolio after the 1st of September will be issued the new version 5 on the digital platform. All candidates, irrespective of the portfolio version they've been issued, will be asked some questions at the point of verification about the new HCPC Standards of Proficiency and what the differences are, just to make sure that they do know what the differences are. So we could have somebody who's issued with a portfolio in August this year that technically has 3 years to complete that before it times out. So for this bridging period of time, we've agreed with the HCPC that I will design and create a set of questions that verifiers will ask at the point of verification for anyone who's on the version 4.3 portfolio, just to check they know what's changed, which things are much more emphasised in the new portfolio and in the new standards, and that they can discuss that in an informed way. So it's not lots and lots of detail, it's about their awareness of that. And also for anyone who is currently registered or is a training officer, they will also need to be aware of what those updates are, because if they were audited by the HCPC, could be in September, could be in October, they're also going to need to know. So there's a piece of work to be done about familiarising people with the main changes, which I outlined on the slides earlier, and to be able to talk about that in an informed way. So the new Standards of Proficiency have been mapped to the existing sections and modules in the registration training portfolio. So what we were really conscious of is not changing it too much, but clearly updating it so that you can see where the new standards have gone and where they sit. So I'm really pleased to tell you that the overall structure has remained the same. It's got a few modifications and more standards have gone in, but the overall structure of the portfolio is very similar to what you'll be familiar with from the last version of the portfolio. We did release a simple mapping document that Jim put together, which was the sections and modules of the portfolio against all of the standards of proficiency in May, and that's on the homepage of the IBMS website. If you haven't seen it, it's a single page PDF. It's a really handy reference guide. And the reason we did that then in May was to allow people to start to update their training plans so they could see which standards of proficiency are going to be in which bits of the portfolio, start to think about how their evidences might change to map to those new standards. So these are the differences that are between the new portfolio and the old. So you'll see the module titles are the same apart from section 1, module 2, which used to be equality and diversity. Now it's equality, diversity and inclusion. So all of those new standards, which are around EDI, we've incorporated into module 2. So in the previous version of the portfolio, there were only 3 standards of proficiency that were really around EDI. So what we've done with section 1, module 2 is to add in the other standards of proficiency, which are focused on EDI. So there are 15 of them. You don't need to know the numbers. I've just put them in for completeness. But the standards of proficiency around EDI are much bigger. So we've put them where they naturally sit into section 1, module 2. And we've done the same thing in section 2. So section 2, module 2, used to be health and safety, and what we've done is we've added in the well-being information, so that module is now health and safety and well-being. So all that stuff about knowing yourself and knowing how to take care of yourself and identifying if you need support, we've added into that. So it's about physical health and it's about mental health all in one place. So again, previously, that module used to have 7 standards of proficiency. And again, there are now 15 standards of proficiency that relate to the topics covered in that module. So we've included them. And again, the numbers are just there for that module, just for completeness. So what you'll see is, as you look at the new portfolio, what we tried to do is to balance the standards of proficiency across the existing portfolio structure. We've tried to keep it familiar and similar to what we've had previously. Put the standards of proficiency that are new where they make the most sense. We've kept knowledge and competency, so that we looked at, where would this sit? What kind of evidence would that need to have? And we've balanced them as much as we can across the different modules, because they did feel in some of the modules previously a little bit unbalanced. 3 pieces of evidence might have felt a little bit much for section 1, module 2 previously. What we've tried to do is balance them. So the absolute number might not be the same, but I think all of them have got within a certain number of each other. So we tried to balance them much more across the portfolio. And what we've said this time is being really, really clear that the evidence that's submitted by the candidate must cover and must be mapped to the standards of proficiency. So previously there was a little bit of a grey area where we said, actually, you don't need to map to them all. We just need to know that you've covered them all and your trainer can sign things off and it doesn't have to be in the evidence. And that was just causing a lot of confusion at the point of verification, and whether it was the evidence or actually I've got a supplementary folder over here that's got other bits in. So we think it's neater and tidier to say the pieces of evidence should be clear and concise, but those pieces of evidence should be mapped in discussion between the training officer and the candidate to clearly evidence which of those standards of proficiency have been hit in that one piece of evidence. So that's what we're asking people to do, and we've tried to make that much clearer. So we're still going to ask for 30 pieces of evidence. That will stay the same. Section 1, module 5 previously had a piece of mandatory evidence, which was a reflective statement that we asked all candidates to do as evidence 1 in that module. What we've done for the new portfolio, in consultation with people who run degree programs, people who are trainers, people from across the 4 nations, we did lots of consultation and lots of discussion with people, was to create a training framework which includes a mandatory piece of evidence for each of the 10 modules. The reason we've done that is to scaffold the training and improve consistency in the pieces of evidence that we're seeing, and to help people with their training plans. A lot of labs now have a training plan across different disciplines, and they already have these things in place. So when we were testing out and we were asking people and getting feedback, they were saying, yep, that's fine, I already do that. Yep, use a case study for that already. Yep, I do a spider diagram with annotations. All of those look sensible. So we're doing it to be helpful and to give a scaffold rather than to make people change things for the sake of it. The details of the mandatory pieces of evidence we released at the end of July, and there was also a frequently asked questions document, which is also on the website. So if you go to the homepage under resources, you can't miss it. I've asked them to pin it so that you can't miss it. All of that information is there. So you can go and have a look and you can see the information so that you can have a look at those, and hopefully some of the questions you might have today will be answered in the frequently asked questions. So just for completeness, I know the writing is quite small, but for completeness, I've just cut and pasted the mandatory pieces of evidence information into the next 2 slides. So you can see for each of the modules in section 1, it says what the mandatory piece of evidence is, and we have mapped that to the standards of proficiency that we think it will demonstrate. Evidences 2 and 3 in every module are flexible. It's up to the candidate and the training officer to make that choice, because what we don't want to do is stifle innovation and, you know, the creativity that people have in the sorts of things that they bring to the portfolio. So the mandatory pieces of evidence are meant to help with consistency, but all of those really interesting, different, new, novel ways of evidencing the standards we wanted to keep. So evidences 2 and 3 are a free choice by the candidate and the training officer, but they must ensure that across evidences 2 and 3, they're hitting the remaining standards of proficiency for that module. So I won't go through each of the modules in turn. They're here for reference if you want to go back to them. And this is the document that is on the website if you want to go and refer to it. We've sent it out to all of our members and fellows. We've sent it out to verifiers and trainers. We're hoping that everybody has seen this and that they're using it. But when you're talking to your placement labs, if they haven't seen it, can you make sure that they have incorporated it into their updates for the training plans going forwards after September the 1st? Exactly the same process for section 2, 5 modules again. Evidence 1 is going to be the mandatory piece of evidence for each of those modules as you go through. And again, it says what it is. Some of them we've said exactly what we want it to be, like a case study or a personal statement. For others, we've asked that they demonstrate or give an example of. And again, that's to help with a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of creativity. So what we'll do in the guidance documents is give examples of things that might be good. So produce an example risk assessment, it's fairly straightforward. Participate in a scheduled quality audit, again, fairly straightforward. So what we're asking people to do is to take that as a basis for the training, but let the candidate have their own individuality and their own self-reflection and their own experience in those pieces of evidence. And again, we've mapped the standards of proficiency for the mandatory pieces and indicated which standards would need to be evidenced across evidence 2 and 3. So over to you, Jim. Do you want to take control of the slides? And I'll mute in case my dogs start to bark again.
Lovely. Superb. I should. Let's just check it's working.
Yeah, I've allowed you to
there
have
we
control.
go. Yes, it is. It is. Excellent. So thanks, Sue. So yeah, version 5 of the portfolio that is launching on the 1st of September represents a step change for where we're going with the Institute and how we're delivering this pre-registration training, because we're going digital. As Sue has already mentioned, and as you've possibly seen in some of the comms that have been released from the Institute, we've selected the OneFile ePortfolio platform to deliver that qualification. So it will be a digital only qualification. There will be no PDF or Word alternative to that. So we are very much pushing everybody into the use of OneFile. The intention is that as we move forward beyond the initial rollout, that OneFile will pick up the registration portfolio for all of our routes to registration. So we will be rolling in initially the kind of standard approach to completing the registration training portfolio. So that will be people who do it in the workplace after graduation, and those who are completing it as part of a placement year as they do their degree. So we are at the start of a journey, and we do ask for a little bit of support and kind of patience if there are some bumps in the road, but hopefully we've got a relatively robust structure, and that is partly what I'm going to share with you now when the slides behave. Yeah, so we've created an initial workflow that is designed to outline how we suggest OneFile could be embedded into completion of the reg portfolio. I'm going to go through it in a stepwise manner now, just to kind of familiarise yourself, or to familiarise you guys with the portfolio, and to show you, in essence, we're keeping things very, very similar to how they're done now. We're just doing them in a digital space in a much more efficient way. As per the current process of issuing the portfolio to a candidate, we will still initiate that through the workplace to make sure that those initial checks of the appropriate training team, the appropriate training officer or lab manager or training manager is in place, and that the lab has actually got capacity to deliver that training in a realistic time frame. So the process will be initiated by somebody in the workplace in exactly the same way as it is now. But of course, as we roll forwards over the next 12 months, the idea is that we bring in one step change after another to hopefully move everybody in the right direction. So this is stage one of the three-step process. Stage one is the enrollment phase. And like I've just said, that will be initiated by email by somebody in the workplace. From this point onwards, everything else associated with the registration portfolio, so the collection of evidence, signing off evidence, verification, all of the verification reports, all of that will take place now inside of one file. There won't any longer be any backwards and forwards between different email inboxes, between verifiers, trainees, training managers, the institute. It will all take place and be consolidated into one file, which means that everybody gets really timely updates, because it will boot the notifications through to you only when there is something there for you to see or do. So it kind of helps you control your diary and your workflow a little bit. So all of the enrolment material will be dealt with through one file. So getting somebody onto program will all be handled through one file. As we move into stage two, once that enrolment, that initial onboarding into the one file portfolio has been completed, one file will really come into its own in managing and tracking evidence against the SOPs that Sue has just talked us all through. The beauty of one file is that it does all of the tracking and sign off automatically based on literally just tick boxes from the appropriate user. One file is really good at structuring the delivery of any training that is being delivered. So like Sue was saying, we want to make sure that we're maintaining a high quality experience in terms of generating high quality trainees that have got the knowledge, that have got the competence that they need. But we also need to recognise the flexibility that different hospitals and situations and trusts require. And so one file is really good at that. We can set up different structures through the one file portfolio that are specific to the individual user if we need to go that specific. Our initial idea is that for the launch and rollout of the portfolio at Congress this year, we will suggest one specific route through the portfolio that may or may not work for everybody, and then we will support trusts and hospitals to deliver local variations of that as and when are appropriate to their needs. So as they update their own training plans and processes and that kind of thing, we will work with them locally to make sure that that is reflected in what they do in one file. The third phase of the workflow to deliver the Reg portfolio is for verification. One file will natively work with Microsoft Teams. So for verifications that take place online, the verification can take place without even leaving I'll try that bit again, without even leaving one file, which means that the verifier, the trainee, and anybody else that needs to be there can access the portfolio and the meetings all in one space. One file is also flexible enough to arrange everybody's diaries for a face-to-face verification, if that is the choice that's made. The only requirement of a face-to-face verification is that the verifier and the trainer and the trainee will all just need access to a computer. So that's the only thing that might need to be facilitated that's different to how face-to-face verifications take place at the moment. One file, as part of our build, we are streamlining the process of completing the laboratory feedback form, of completing the verification feedback form, and tying all of those things together at the very end of the period of training so that the candidate can receive their certification, as quickly as possible, in line with things like the completion of the degree or their apprenticeship or whatever the particular route is that they are following. So the idea is that it makes everything much more streamlined. The graphic that you're looking at on the screen now, I have available as a PDF, so I will send this out as a result of this meeting so that you can have a look at it in a bit more detail, maybe when you can see the text a little bit more clearly. I'm very, very happy to take questions as well on this after the session, if anybody's got any questions about this in particular. So I thought it would be quite important as well to give everybody in today's meeting an initial overview of what we see the rollout of OneFile being, so that you can kind of get to grips with the changes that can be expected and maybe the support that you're going to need to give to placement students to just kind of let them know what's coming and that kind of thing, because it's no word of a lie that the transition from all of the versions of the portfolio that have come before to this version represents a significant change in how we are delivering this. What we've done to date is we've had an initial scoping exercise where we consulted with a whole range of different providers that offer portfolio solutions. We evaluated in high levels of detail 9 different providers against a range of different criteria. Some of those criteria I've shown here, and the most important criteria were that the provider would need to be NHS friendly. So the security protocols around NHS access to online portfolios and other solutions like that are relatively tight, and so we needed a provider that wouldn't be blocked by the NHS. We totally appreciate that not all of our registrants and trainees come from the NHS, but a significant proportion do. We also needed a solution that is tolerant of local variation, so different approaches to training, slightly different structures, different timelines, and that kind of thing. When we kind of looked at everything holistically, OneFile was the standout winner. And some of the additional reasons that make OneFile the standout winner is that it is used quite extensively by the National School for Healthcare Science in things like the STP and the HSST training programs. And so what that means is that there is a very strong user base of OneFile already in the NHS. And so that should mean that our training responsibilities are significantly easier, because there are lots of people already within NHS laboratories and elsewhere that are using OneFile. The other reason that existing link between the NHS and OneFile was quite useful is because the NHS themselves produce quite a lot of training material on how to use OneFile, and so it really, really helps people with this big change into a new way of doing things. We got to the end of that scoping period where we'd kind of signed on the dotted line with OneFile back at the beginning of July, when we were putting out the initial comms in relation to the mandatory evidence and that kind of thing. Since the beginning of July and up until today, we are still refining and finessing the structure of the OneFile platform with OneFile themselves, so that when we launch it on the 1st of September, it's in the best possible shape. And to help us do that, we've engaged some consultancy work from people who have used OneFile quite extensively, with a similar user base to us, so approximately 2,000 new candidates per year, and in a similar sector that's regulated. So we're using a consultant that's done this quite extensively within the pharmacy sector. So from the 1st of September, we will move into the rollout phase of OneFile, and that rollout will take place predominantly at Congress towards the end of September. There are currently, it's growing by the day, but at the minute there are 4 scheduled talks on OneFile at Congress this year. So if you are going to Congress, I would highly recommend that you come along. Those talks are designed to be getting started guides. So giving a heads up on the kind of information that you will need to have ready at the point in time at which you are ready to get learners on board with OneFile for the 2023-24 academic year. We're running a selection of different info sessions like today's for different user groups so that we can start to bring people on board and kind of drag them with us, so that we can give them a heads up on what they need to do, how they need to do it, and what timeframes they might want to work to. And Sue and I are just finalising some of the initial guidance documents that will be released as version 5 goes live on the 1st of September. The initial guidance documents are designed to be supportive to the extent that a lot of people might be able to self-serve with some of the questions that they've got. And so those initial guidance documents are delayed at the moment by the build of OneFile, because we need to be able to make sure that the screen captures that go into those guidance documents match what people will actually see when they log in through OneFile. So the delay at the moment is just making sure that OneFile is finished so that the pictures, the pretty bits that go in the guidance, matches what everybody will see. What we are going to try and avoid is building in confusion. We want to try and iron that out and get things right before we release it widely. That rollout phase will take us until December this year. So pretty much the rest of this calendar year will be given out to the initial onboarding and just finessing of getting people onto the new portfolio. And so it would be really, really helpful for us if you could send the messaging out to your candidates that once they've submitted their applications, things will happen. But because OneFile works on a batch process, it might be 2 or 3 days before they hear anything back, just as the next batch gets processed through the OneFile enrollment system. So the messaging is keep calm. If you've not heard anything within a week, send us a gentle reminder, just so that we can check that as part of the rollout, something hasn't fallen between 2 stones. From January 2024, we will move into our embedding phase of OneFile. And during this embedding phase, we will deliver some online and in-person training to each of the different user groups that we're going to identify. And I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes' time when we talk about user groups and privileges and that kind of thing. So we'll deliver online and in-person training. At the moment, it's my intention to run a series of roadshows around the UK, the gym show with merch. It'll be really exciting, around the UK, where we deliver specific training sessions. And one of the things that I would really like to ask for your support with is if in the various institutions that you are from, you will be able to facilitate some space where we could deliver that training from, you know, a conference room or a large lecture theatre or something in your institution. So if you could help with that, that would be fantastic. Obviously, I could be brought along into your training for trainers events and that kind of thing, and help there if necessary. One of the questions that I've just seen pop in is that the training should be delivered before rollout, and it's a valid point. The reason that it's difficult to do that is because users that are new to OneFile need data and stuff in there to be able to kind of work through as part of the training. It's very, very difficult to get within OneFile dummy users that fulfill the criteria of the users that you will be working with. So we need to have data in there to work with, which is why we've had to do it perhaps a little bit of the opposite way around to what might seem intuitive. As well as that that training that we will offer, there will be an IBMS web page that contains support documents that are updated regularly as different issues come in that we're made aware of, as they're solved, as we get workthroughs and that kind of thing. And we'll support that with some short training videos to help people complete specific tasks. Again, there's quite a lot of this material already available for colleagues in the NHS using OneFile to deliver other training programs, but we will make some specific ones for our registration training portfolio. The embedding phase will finish in about August or September next year, where we will do a 12-month evaluation to see what the rollout of OneFile has been like, how it's gone, what have we learned, those kind of things. And crucially, do we want to continue with the long-term use of OneFile for this portfolio? So at the moment, we are signed up for a 2-year initial period to embed, to deliver, to test OneFile. The idea being that we will extend that contract with OneFile should everybody be happy with the structure and the process. As we go into the second year of rolling out OneFile, we will move into the enhancement phase. And this is where we will follow some data-driven enhancement of what we deliver. So we will use the feedback, we will use the metrics that OneFile can collect on things like completion rates, progress, assessor workloads, verifier caseloads, those kind of things. We will use that data to inform how we develop and refine the use of OneFile, or we will use that data to help us scope and develop and find an alternative product if it looks as though OneFile isn't going to fit the bill. As we move into the enhancement phase, we will also start to address various local requirements. So as hospitals are saying, the training plan that we started with was great, but actually we're going to change X, Y, and Z to reflect local differences in what we do. Can you help us structure that within OneFile so that we can keep moving forwards? That's where we'll really start to become more specific and more bespoke to the different trusts and laboratories that will be delivering this training. So that's how we've got to where we are and where we plan to go over the next kind of 12 to 18 months. That's given us a series of questions that we really need to ask you. I'll go through these questions and then Sherry, I'll come back and answer the question you've just raised because it's a really valid question. The questions that we need to ask you are, how soon do you need to be able to get trainees signed up for the digital portfolio? It officially launches on the 1st of September, but how soon do you need trainees to be able to access and get started actually putting material in? The other thing that would help us streamline the processes is if you could tell us what your existing administration arrangements are with the hospitals and employers that you work with. So what's that process of requesting the portfolios? How does it work on the ground with you? We've done quite a lot of consultation to see what happens around the UK, but the more information we get in, the more of a complete solution that we can have that works for everybody. For those colleagues that manage and run apprenticeships, what other packages do you use for tracking things like off-the-job training or tracking KSBs of the apprenticeship standards that you work with? The reason that we could do with knowing this is because OneFile does offer a huge number of integrations. So wherever things can be cross-mapped and tracked, that would form part of the enhancement phase that we'd be looking at from about this time next year onwards. The other reason that it's interesting and useful for us to know what other packages you use to track the progress of your apprentices is because for those of you that are already using OneFile to manage your apprenticeship students, you will be able to keychain everything that you are doing for your existing apprentices and everything that we are doing with the registration portfolio from the IBMS as well. I appreciate if you've never used OneFile before, you will have no idea what I've just said there in terms of keychaining. For those of you that do use OneFile, what it really means is you can look at your apprenticeship students and your registration training portfolio students within OneFile all in the same place. So it will bring it all together into one place. The other question that I'd like to ask is, can you support us to run regional training? Like I said a few minutes ago, do you have the capacity or the capability or desire to help facilitate some local, in-person, face-to-face training for hospitals that you work with or that are in your locality, so that we can actually do this on the ground and everybody can see it working and everybody can get a really good quality training experience? Sherry did ask the question about what happens if we don't like one file. I sincerely hope that we're not in that position, but it is a possibility. So at the moment, we have signed up for a 2-year contract with one file. And the reason that we've signed up for a 2-year contract with one file is because our data analytics of completion rates for the registration training portfolio show that most people complete within 14 months of starting their portfolio. Admittedly, that will be different for apprentices and that kind of thing, but this is based on averages of rather large numbers. What we've agreed internally is that if we hit the 12-month mark and our 12-month evaluation is not positive for one file, we will pause our enrolments onto one file and decide at that point what happens. Any trainee that is on programme with one file will finish their portfolio through one file, whenever that may be. The reason that we've set those marks in the sand as to evaluating what we do next is so that should we decide to move away from one file, and I sincerely hope we don't, should we move away from one file, we've got the time then so that whatever replaces one file can be introduced in a streamlined and kind of efficient manner. So that's why we've taken that approach. And that's it from me. So I will be quiet and I'll offer control back to you, Sue, for the PowerPoint. And I'm very, very happy to take questions or anything that anybody wants to ask. For those people that have put in the chat that you're prepared to facilitate training, thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you. So
Excellent.
we were thinking it would be hosting in a room, like you said, Jim, or possibly in an IT suite.
Yeah,
so if
that'd
people
be
wanted to get onto one file and have a play with it, we just wondered if most universities have IT suites, if it was a Wednesday afternoon, if that might be possible. So if anybody's got a specific question, if you've got your hand up, I think Jacqueline was first. Do you want to go first, and I'll keep an eye on the chat and monitor the chat?
Hello, thank you both of you. That was really, really useful, really interesting, really informative, made a lot of sense, and sounds really, really exciting. I've got a couple of questions. So I've got a student, I'm from University of Brighton. I run the placements module, but not the clinical placements module. So we have some students who go out of the network, and I've got a student who's going to start a hospital in Essex. The training officer there has asked me to order the portfolio, which beforehand would have been fine. But now I'm thinking, you were saying about it has to come from the employer's side. Do I need to get her to request for this new one, or can it come from me in collaboration with her at Essex?
So that's a really good question, Jacqueline, because we were talking about this, weren't we, Jim? Because it's different whether it's sandwich or integrated at the moment. So is your placement sandwich or?
Yeah, it would be.
Okay, so if it's sandwich, it would normally be the workplace that would ask for it. That's been my experience. If it's integrated, it's normally that the person who runs the integrated program kind of looks after a group of students. So we can ask colleagues who have integrated programs what they'd like to do, but it seems sensible to me that for an integrated program, the person who runs that for the placement could send us a list of who the candidate is, who the trainer is, with contact details as a just an Excel spreadsheet as a group, and then we will add them to one file. If it's individuals on placements that are sandwich, it would normally be that the workplace would order the portfolio for them, because then my team know that that's an approved training lab. That's somebody who's on an accredited program. Yeah, so it would normally be
perfect. Yeah, well, I'll bat it back to her then. And the second question I had is, we've not been able to get funding to go to Congress this year, and you mentioned the training, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to miss out. So are there going to be any other opportunities for training? So we can host at Brighton, but obviously I want to maybe get some people ahead of the curve before you guys come down, so we can facilitate properly.
Absolutely. So on that point, I'm having conversations with comms colleagues internally at the Institute and also with people at the ICC in Birmingham to see whether those initial talks that we give at Congress can even just be streamed.
Wow.
Because all of the talks that are scheduled for OneFile are part of the free programme, so somebody's not getting anything different by watching a stream talk. They're not getting something for free. So if I can facilitate that, we'll absolutely circulate the details.
Brilliant.
If not, what I might get somebody to do is just sit at the back with a video camera, video it, and then just upload it kind of that night or the next day, so that we've got it. Yeah.
Okay. So just keep my name on file if you want to kind of communicate about setting up any training. All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
That's lovely. Thanks, Jacqueline.
Lovely. So I can see Angeli was next. So Angeli, do you want to ask your question? I can see a couple have come in on the chat as well.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Sue. I have one question, and that is that, we had been using OneFile for our level 5 and level 6, and last year we moved to Aptim. So are we supposed to be aligning that with IBMS, or how do we progress? Because then it would be 2 OneFiles which our apprentices would be using then.
I think if you've set your apprentices up on something else, that's okay. I think the point Jim was making was if they are on OneFile, it just means you can see all of the information in one place. If you've got a different system and that decision's been made at your institution for good reasons, that's absolutely fine. So you can monitor their off-the-job hours and then progress against the KSBs using one system, and you can monitor the portfolio progression using OneFile. Do you agree, Jim?
Yes. Yeah. If I understood the question correctly, yes.
And what about those who are already using OneFile, because our older system was OneFile? So there are certain apprentices who are still using OneFile. So then it means that they will have 2 different logins?
Well, to be honest, that's entirely down to you and what you would prefer. If you want them to have keychained access so that they have one login where they see everything, fine. If you want it to be separate so that it's not keychained, then either encourage them to sign up with a different email address or get in touch with us at the Institute and we can remove that keychain from them so that it is then 2 separate accounts. But again, this is the kind of thing that we need to look at very, very locally with individuals. It's something we've anticipated, but we're not quite sure of the extent of the need yet.
All right. Thank you so much, Jim. I will be in touch with my apprenticeship team and I will come back to you. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you. I'm going to just drop my email address in the chat as well, just in case anybody doesn't have it and they need to follow up with me.
Thanks, Jim. I think next is Sherry. Did you want to ask your question, Sherry?
Yeah. So from what I can gather, you will be probably ordering a bin block per year for our apprenticeship cohort. So we'll be ordering, we'd be asking for access for ourselves so that we can monitor it, our student and their mentor. So obviously there's a cost to the university. Do we know what that cost is going to be yet, so we can start planning it into our financial planning? And B, because of that cost, can we look to see as whether the ordering of the verifications can go back to the IBMS, because it's having 2 different systems is complicated with any for the verification. So anything we could potentially hand back, we'd be quite happy with.
Of course.
I'm smiling, Sherry, because you're not the first person to ask the question. So I'll deal with the cost thing first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So for sandwich students, what happens, and I can see that Fiona put in the chat that at her university, they pay for the sandwich student portfolios. We used to do the same at my institution as well. In other places, it's the workplace. So for a sandwich student or for somebody in employment, they pay at the moment £137, £139 for the portfolio, and that covers the admin costs and us sending it out, all of those things. For the new portfolio on OneFile, there is a cost to us for each person who has one of those digital portfolios, and that cost is roughly £50 a year. So what we've said for integrated programmes is that you didn't know we were going to do this for this academic year and you won't have asked for that money. So what we're going to do is we're going to say we will cover the cost for this initial year where people go on to version 5, but going forwards, we will ask for the portfolio fee from integrated degrees. So your next question, Sherry, is entirely appropriate. If we're paying you to do it, why am I organising the stuff? Which someone else has asked me as well. And I think the answer to that is we're happy to be flexible. So when I've asked other people who've got integrated programmes, they said they actually would quite like to keep hold of the bit at the end where they organise their own verifiers from their own pool, because they think that's quicker. If you would rather we take it back, and we do everything from one file, and my team organise the verifiers for you, and that's from across the UK, we can do that. So I think what we'll do in the next phase is we're starting to enrol people onto it. If you are an integrated degree programme, when you send us your spreadsheets, I saw Ian said it was sensible, which makes me feel confident if Ian thinks it's sensible. Send us your spreadsheet of the candidate, the person who's going to look after them, and also the placement tutor or the programme lead. Because what Jim and I are looking at are different levels of access. So the candidate can add and edit, the training officer can add and edit. You could be, as the programme lead or placement tutor, somebody who can observe what's going on. So when you have a placement meeting, you can talk to them about progress, but you don't need to do anything. You're not editing or adding anything to that portfolio, but you just have an overview of how your apprentices and students are doing. At the end, when they press go and say, right, portfolio is complete, we're ready for assessment, that can either trigger a contact to you as the person who looks after that route to say, right, okay, we've got our 10 people I've been asking for the last couple of months, who's free, who can do the assessments, here's my list of which verifier is going to be associated with which candidate. That's great, we'll assign them for you. Or you can say, actually, over to you. We're ready. We've got this number of candidates. Can you assign the verifiers? So we'll keep talking to people, Sherry, because I think it's important if people have a preference that we can facilitate it.
Yeah, because the way we foresee it is we'll have to have potentially 4 accesses, because the course lead needs the access, but the workplace tutor is the one that's having the reviews. So we're both going to need oversight. And will that come in as part of that? Per student. Okay.
So it just needs to be in the spreadsheet, doesn't it, Jim? So I think what we'll be looking at is who is the person, what is their role in the process, and what's their contact email. So that could be candidate, training officer, could be training manager if they wanted to be able to see it as well. And then it would be placement tutor, work-based learning tutor, because we know, because Jim and I have been involved in apprenticeships, they're the ones doing the tripartite meetings. So we've already come up with a little list, haven't we, Jim, of who we think might need to observe and see what's going on, and who needs to be able to access and edit.
This is one of the areas where there is such different practice around the country that we really need to have it live to see what people are doing, and then have those discussions. Any changes that we make take effect instantly, so it's not that it's going to take us months to facilitate it once we've got a structure. We just need to know what people need to do. So things like you just said, Sherry, are really useful to hear.
Debbie, I see Debbie's. Oh, sorry. Go on, Sherry.
So I was just going to say, I know we haven't got won't have a digital copy of the portfolio, but will we have a digital copy of the structure of how it's all laid out, so that we can do guidance documents around?
Yes,
you've got that now, Sherry. So there's the PDF, which is the dots, and you've got the mandatory evidence, which is just a Word document. And the reason we've left it as Word is you can edit that now. So it says mandatory evidence is this, evidence 2, evidence 3 in one row. You could just make that 2 rows, and then you can make that the training plan.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I'll let someone else have a go.
Lovely. I'm just conscious of time. The 5 minutes to the end of the meeting just flashed up, so I'm just conscious of time. Debbie, you're next.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering about when the other portfolios came out. It was a case of if you started working on the previous portfolio, you could your students could continue that. So
yes.
My students will, they're the third year students with us being a 4-year degree that will go out on placement, and they'll go out on placement in January. Is there an option to stay on the version 4?
If they've started it, Debbie, so it will be the case of when you've issued it. So I've asked the HCPC a couple of times just to be very, very clear. So what they've said to me is if the portfolio has been issued before the 31st, up to the 31st of August this year, so if you've given it to them to already start working on and to get some competencies signed off by you as the placement tutor, they will continue with that portfolio, and that's what they'll complete. If it's not been issued yet, and it would be issued in January, then it would be version 5.
Okay.
Does that help?
Fine.
They've already got it.
Yes, it does. If they've already kind of started working towards it,
absolutely fine. So you would just need to make a note. So I said hopefully it will be quite obvious to us and the team, because as soon as a new registration portfolio version 5 is issued to someone, that's on one file. So we should have quite a clear delineation between who's on the old one and who's on the new one. For integrated programmes, because you're still looking after that in-house, we wouldn't necessarily know, but we'll know if they're not on one file, they were on 4.3. So by process of elimination, we'll be able to work it out, because clearly the verifier will need to know, is it a 4.3 and I need to ask additional questions, or is it version 5 and I'm doing it on one file?
And so then they will just cover, because obviously mentioned that as well, that the HCPC want verifiers then, so it would just be a case of that our verifiers would then carry out that process.
And I've got that on my to-do list for this week, Deborah, to just come up with some sensible questions, just a few. What kind of things might we want people to ask? So what I might do is just send that around people and say, you know, we want it to be fairly light touch, but, you know, to make sure that people do have the information that they need about what the differences are. So I might just share that with you, with a few placement tutors and apprenticeship people, and just say, do you think that's sensible? If you were doing that verification, does that look about right? Because we don't want to grill them, you know, but we need to make sure they know.
Right. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Claudia is next.
It'll be just a very quick one. If their workplace tutor or mentor were to change, how quick or easy is it going to be to update these access?
Jim can answer that, and then I'll say quicker than at the moment, Claudia.
Oh, brilliant.
Again, that's another thing that we need to have a discussion about in terms of how people do things at the moment, because we've got a draft change form ready and waiting within OneFile, so that this kind of thing can be handled really quite quickly. So it will effectively be a case of how quickly do you update the form in OneFile, how quickly do we see that and kind of reply to it. So it can take place in about 10 minutes. If you're on the phone to us and say we're changing this now, can we have this person changed, we can do it there and then. So it just depends on the process that you follow, whether you pick up the phone and ring us, or whether you initially send us the change form in through OneFile. So yeah, but like Sue's just said, quicker than it is now.
That's great, thank you.
So we're anticipating the person in my team that looks after the registration inbox at the moment will continue to monitor that, but we'll also be doing some of the OneFile admin as well. So that person should pick up those things. So if you email the reg inbox or you ring, then that person should be the person in charge of the OneFile bits as well.
We hope that with the efficiency, sorry Sue, with the efficiency side of things, if we're reducing the amount of email backwards and forwards that OneFile can handle, it means that email queries that come in about things like changes we've just talked about will be handled quicker, because they'll get picked up faster.
Yeah,
great, thank you.
Cool. And then is it Thamari?
Hi, I'm Thamari from Middlesex. I'm the program leader for the BSc Applied Biomedical Science. Currently, we have some issues with finding verifiers out of HSL TDL, because we got like most of the students on placement with HSL TDL, and because you already mentioned that we can request you to find from the other pool from your IBMS team, so that will be useful for future. You also mentioned the access to files, because that was my question, but you mentioned it. So we're going to send you the list, and then you provide access. So to like the student as well as the training officer and the placement tutor.
Yeah.
In terms of when they progress adding each more evidence module, once they complete it, for example, module 1, will it be locked?
Will it be locked? Was that the question? Sorry.
Yeah, will it be locked? Will they add anything further on it? So how does it work?
So it's an iterative thing, isn't it, Jim? So the candidate might think it's finished. The training officer looks at it and goes, actually, there's a bit more to do, but there are boxes for comments. So it will work in a similar way to the way that it works at the moment. So it won't be locked, but once once the person who's training them has then ticked and said, I'm happy with that, at that point, it's not locked, is it, Jim? But it's finished.
Yeah, it's marked as completed. So unless somebody went in and deliberately changed something, it would show as finished. It's not locked as in you can't ever get in there again. But it does kind of control progression in the respect that it tries to push you forwards. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And the beauty of the system is it's got a really, really useful dashboard that flags anything that you need to do in yellow. So it's like a post-it note. So it says you've got to do this. And it also shows you progress as well. So it will be really easy for the training officer and for anybody else like the placement tutor or program leader or work-based learning tutor to just see what the progress has been. And it will hopefully stop them missing things. So if they haven't done something, the system will tell them.
Yeah, it does have inbuilt gap analysis. So it will show you what still needs completing and what's not been marked as.
So currently the training of the tutor has no way to look at their progress, but this one can allow you to see.
That was one of the things I really liked about it from an apprenticeship background, of not being able to track these kind of things. The fact that OneFile can was manna from heaven for me.
Yeah, and it also sends the notifications as well. When you need to know something, it will tell you. So it's not somebody doesn't have to remember to say. Yeah. So
just final question. When we come to the sorry, I lost it. So it's about verification, yeah. So do you recommend for the one file always online verification or like in person? Because it's more convenient to do it online, isn't it?
It can be either. We want to keep the flexibility, don't we, Jim? So we're very aware that it is quite a big change for some people, and they do very much like going face to face and going to the workplace and get a much better feel for what's going on. We don't want to take that away, but that person will just need a laptop and some Wi-Fi to be able to access the portfolio to talk to the candidate about and the training officer. But if you would rather do them online, the majority of our verifications at the moment are online. So yeah, if people would like to do them that way, that's absolutely fine. No problem. Thanks, Dylan. I can see Paul had to go as well. Everyone's getting back to those clearing hotlines. So
thank you.
If you do want to say and you've got more questions, we're happy to take any more questions, aren't we, Jim?
I was just going to pick up Fiona's comments in the chat box. So the payment side of things, Fiona's comment was about, you know, it might be the hospital that order the portfolio, but the university pay. Payments sit entirely outside of one file. So whatever the existing payment structure that you have in place at the minute can absolutely roll over and be carried on in exactly the same way as is done currently. The plan is not to mess with that or change it at all. The next point again from Fiona was about something in one file at the end of the sandwich degree. There is a process where the university can confirm successful completion. Yes, absolutely, and we can discuss that with you as to whether you just want that to be a notification that the portfolio has been completed successfully, or whether you actually want a box to tick to say that you acknowledge that it's been successfully completed. It's entirely up to you. We can handle that however you want to handle it. Oh, hi Fiona.
Hiya. Actually, I was actually approaching that from the other angle. From the angle of which
competence issue.
Yes, so we inform the IBMS at the end of the degree the students have successfully completed their degree.
Yeah.
That was kind of from the other angle I was approaching that.
I think again at the moment, Fiona, we'd probably say we'll try and mirror current processes just so people know what they're doing. So we will know because we can check on one file that the portfolio is done. So you would just send us a pass list as normal to say who's finished. So I think if we can mirror those processes for now, as we're finding our feet, and then if we can do it in a quicker, more automated way, then we'll move to that. But yeah, to get both pieces of the jigsaw that we know they've done the portfolio, you tell us they've finished the degree and there's a transcript, great, then we'll send off the certificate.
I think,
and if I could just go back to my other question, because this is kind of what I'm doing today, thinking about ordering portfolios.
No pressure then.
No, any changes to the paper application form, we'll still be putting in that same paper application form or emailed application form for a portfolio.
Do you know what? I think if you're doing it today, Fiona, do it on the current one.
Do the
That's
one
absolutely fine. Yeah. Jim and I have talked about some of the things on the application form could probably come off that as we go forwards because they're on one file anyway.
Yeah.
But if you're doing them today, do your normal process and the team will deal with them. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
The idea is that anything that comes off the paper application form will go onto one file. So wherever it comes in right now, if it's easy for you to do it on the old form, just do that.
It's not so much I'm going to do it. I was going to send it through to my labs to do.
So are you going to ask them to are they going to request a version 5 or a version 4.3? Because we're before September at the moment.
To be perfectly honest, in the time that it takes for my procurement department to raise a PDF, we will be on version 5.
It'll be 5.
It'll be 5, yeah. And normally they want sight of it, as soon as. So placements start the beginning of September.
Yeah.
So they would normally order them as kind of the first thing that happens once the students are with them with their passports, etc., etc. So that's when we would know that the labs would normally order those.
Okay, so if they happen to come in before September, it might just be worth making a note that we want 5 just in case. But if you're confident it will be in September, then the team will know. So I've sent lots of comms to the team internally about the switchover date and just being clear about who's on what so we don't get lost. So it should be absolutely fine. If there's any confusion, let me know and I'll help you.
No worries.
Brilliant.
One of the points that's come into the chat is it the university's role to train or provide details of the new digital portfolio to the training officer? We'd like to think that we'll lead on that with support from you in the university. So if you can help us facilitate that would be great.
Yeah, and again, it depends on the integrated or sandwich
Yeah,
nature of
absolutely.
your degree. So if you have an integrated degree, we devolve the responsibility to do training for trainers events to you, but we can certainly support you. So I've already been asked to do 2 things in September, which are a training for trainers event as normal, but I'm going to be beamed in and talk about the new portfolio. So Jim and I are more than happy to support that way.
Yeah, and I'm more than happy to kind of come down to your institution as well if you want some support with that training. That's absolutely fine. There's no problem there at all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. Just final question. I have students starting on 4th of September. I guess they can use the new portfolio.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you've not ordered it already, the guiding principle is if you've already ordered it, they'll start 4.3. If you order it after the 1st, they'll start 5.
Then we won't get it by 4th. Do we get it? You know, if I order after 1st of September, will it be available in a few days' time?
Yes, so there'll be yes. Okay. So the system is we're building it at the moment. So our timescale, just to let you know, we got agreement we could do this 6 weeks before launch date. We're now 2 weeks before launch date. So we're building it and troubleshooting it as we go. So by the time you order the portfolio, if the candidate wants to have access to it straight away, it should be ready. I would say that actually they can start to work through getting some evidence and looking at the SOPs and finding the feet in the lab for a few weeks.
Right.
And then they can do it. But if they want access straight away, we'll certainly work towards that. Yeah.
There will need to be before people can go too far in kind of collecting evidence or working through the portfolio itself. Trainees will need some initial training on just how to access it, where are the buttons, what do they need to do. So that's a kind of key priorities for us to get out. So maybe that would form part of the messaging that you give to placement students and apprentices that actually if they want to start getting to grips with this, if they want to start, there's tons on YouTube about how to use OneFile. The National School of Healthcare Science deliver the STP and the HSST through OneFile, and there's tons of support material there that uses very similar terminology and nomenclature to what we're using with the Reg portfolio. So if you want to encourage them to engage there rather than specifically on getting evidence, that might be a good place to start.
Yeah, and I think reassuring people that we're not going to throw them in at the deep end and expect them to know what to do straight away. Yeah. So we're moving to the portfolio, but by the time people are ready to upload evidence and need to click buttons, we should have some resources and some training videos out there. So people shouldn't be trying to find the way on their own. But as Jim says, there are already quite a lot of useful resources out if people just want to have a look and see what the setup looks like.
Thank you.
Sherry, did you want to ask something else?
Yeah, just one last one. Can I have a dummy file? Because there's nothing worse than trying to talk a student through doing something when you can't actually do it yourself. So it would be great to have if universities could have their own sort of dummy student file so that we can have a play and actually go through the process and then use it to teach, as it were.
Absolutely.
As soon as it's ready, Sherry.
That's pretty much where we are with the build at the minute. Is we're putting this in. Sherry, have you used OneFile before, or is it new to you? Right. So when anybody gets a login to OneFile, as default, it comes with the live portfolio site and a mirror practice. So the mirrored practice site is where you can do all of the testing, messing about, breaking it without actually having any impact at all on the live portfolio. So yeah, so it's good. It's good for that kind of teaching and training side of things. Yeah.
But yeah, as I say, we don't launch with the portfolio until after Christmas, so we've got a bit of time here. But it's just the fact that I want to get as much hand on myself before I say this is what you're going to use.
Yeah, totally. Well, obviously part of this kind of journey for us is that we're going to be developing the new training materials as well. So if you want to get stuck in and get meetings booked in with me where we kind of start training you, then we can use that for both of us to learn and kind of develop the stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so just drop me an email.
Thank you.
Cara, I think you're next.
Yeah, hi. Probably a really straightforward question, but I've never ordered a portfolio before because we just print them off from our
just got them.
We just appeared in a box at my office.
Thank you, the PDF's there.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do I go to order them? Are they just available on the website?
Do you know, that's a really good question, Cara, and I'm really sorry I didn't think to explain that, because you won't have done this before. So the best thing to do is just email the registration inbox. It's registration@ibms.org.
Yeah.
Explain that you run an integrated degree programme and ask if they could just send you the application form for candidates, and then it should be that you can just add rows and add people in. I think it is available if you look on the website. I won't swear to where it is, but I think the quickest thing would be to email the inbox, because they're quite on them at the minute. So if you email, explain you've had this session today, I've advised you to contact the team to get the application form, and you'll send a block of people that you want to be added onto the new version.
So once I've got all my students enrolled and I know how many I've got, that's probably the best time to do it. So I know how many.
So if you email to ask for it, and then that gives you time to then go and find out the information you need to put into it, and then send it back in when you're ready.
Brilliant. Sorry.
I was just going to say, what I find it's really good is a pre-induction activity is send it to your apprentices and they can pre-fill it in for you, so that, because they know who their mentors and trainers are, and then you'll get them to practice submitting it to a Dropbox. You've got them all there that you can then forward to the IBMS.
Fantastic.
What I'll do is I'll drop the form into the chat for this meeting so that everybody can access it afterwards, Cara. So you should get that, Cara.
Oh, Fiona's done it. Fiona's on it. Look at that.
Oh, thanks, Fiona.
We love you, Fiona.
Cara, I've just seen that you've offered a training venue as well, and also that you're in Bradford. So I'm literally just down the road from you in Bingley. So I might take you up on that offer and literally just come and sit with you, and we can kind of work through things together, if that helps.
Jim, well, that was going to be my next question. Where do I get my live login from? Somebody who's completely incompetent with computers. Yes, please sign up to any training you've got.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. Then you'll be able to get my email from this, won't you, Jim?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, just let me know when you're happy to make a start, and I'll find some time.
Excellent. And just to reassure you, Cara, I'm not a massive fan of all things technological, and it is very intuitive. So I've looked at the dummy sites that Jim's given me access to that I can't break anything, and actually it is pretty intuitive. So I think you'll be okay once you know how to use it.
Anybody that can use Moodle can use one file. If you can use Moodle, you can use one file. If you can use Blackboard, you'll be a one file whiz before the end of the week, because Blackboard's way harder than one file.
I will. I'll take your word for it. You might find it a bit of a challenge, Jim.
I think challenge accepted. You don't mind that.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Philippa, I think Philippa's next.
Hi, sorry to go kind of back the way. Just kind of considering about having sort of one mentor trainer per student. Our integrated students have typically two, because they do a rotation, and then they also have like tutorials and things where so there's probably about 10 NHS staff on that. That's okay.
Absolutely fine. Yeah, no, absolutely fine. We've started with the simplest scenario, Philippa, but I know where you have them where they rotate around lots of disciplines, it would need to be different people. So Jim and I have already talked about training officer or manager, or the M&A manager, or who might need to sign things off. So if you tell us who those people need to be on your form, then we can just add them.
Yeah. The one thing we might need some support there, Philippa, with is just that structure, because one file is quite staged in how it works. So we would need, of that list of mentors, it doesn't matter how many there is, but within that list there would need to be one that ultimately says, okay, we are now all collectively happy, and I will sign off on behalf of on behalf of everybody else. So everybody else can sign their bits off, but there will need to be that one person that just says, yes, everything that's gone before is absolutely fine, and I'm confirming that here. So we might just need to manage that little bit of it.
Yeah. Just invite people. Ian and Fiona have had to go. Does that sound okay, Philippa, in your context, that there would be an obvious person to nominate as the final signer?
Yeah, I don't think that's an issue, as long as everybody can have access to that.
Yeah, it's no problem at all.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Has anybody else got any questions that you've kind of been ruminating on, you've not had time to ask, that you want to ask before we go? You can always email us and you can ask questions. We are kind of getting things ready as quick as we can, but the more feedback and interaction we have with people who are going to use the system, the better. So we try and get it right when we launch. Anybody got anything else they want to ask? You can either unmute or pop it in there. Is it the same as Pebble Pad? I think it's easy to use.
I've just given a thumbs up to something that I didn't mean to give a thumbs up to there with the Pebble Pad. Similar variations on a theme, I think, is the best way to answer that. Variations on a theme.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you've used any kind of portfolio type system, there'll be bits of it that are familiar and bits of it that are different. But yeah, I think the key thing is that we can set it up so that it should work well for people and it's not too onerous to use. So yeah. I think that's the key take home today, hopefully. And we really we want to be able to demonstrate it to you, but because it's not quite ready yet, we don't want to show you it and then we change it. So we'd rather have it ready and then launch. So. Okay, I can't see any more questions coming in. If you're all happy, you haven't got a question to ask, thank you so much for joining us today on this really busy day. And sorry again for putting it on clearing day. I don't quite know what possessed me. It's been really useful to have your input and questions. So thank you so much. If you want to hang on to ask anything at the end, please do. We'll wait a couple of minutes, but otherwise have a great rest of clearing day and look forward to talking to you about the portfolios again.